So there's been a story floating around for a couple of days now about the future of Super Rugby, how things might look come 2021. I was umming and ahhing as to whether I should do a video on this, but since then the Super Rugby boss has come out and commented on it, so he's given a bit of credibility to at least the discussion. So yeah, we'll have a look at what's being said, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how things are looking. So the main issues brought up in an article from the Sydney Morning Herald just looked at how many teams are going to be in the competition potentially from 2021. With the main thoughts being that it would be down another team to 14 teams, so kind of a return to the old Super 14, which is probably on that Bulls jersey, old Super 14. And talking about which team, if that happened, would be most likely to get the chop. The talk seems to mainly focus around the Sunwolves, which is why I've put them at the top of the board there. Basically because of their largely losing record in Super Rugby thus far. But there was also a little bit of talk about the Sunwolves may be safe if one of the South African teams, I don't know why they said only one, but they said one, looked to join the Cheetahs and the Kings over in the Pro 14 or the Pro whatever it would be if they joined. But why that would be limited to one, I'm not sure. But they said one in the article. So it would be Super 14 without the Sunwolves potentially, or then without one of these teams potentially, and the Sunwolves might get a stay of execution. They did talk about the Jaguares a little bit, basically saying that the Jaguares would probably be pretty safe on the basis that their Super Rugby results have improved, especially in this last season where they made the playoffs. And the fact that they play in the Rugby Championship, they're a member of SANZAAR, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for them to cut the only Argentinian link into Super Rugby. But there was a little bit of talk about if something were to happen in the American continent or continent's rugby environment, that's a perhaps reason why Argentinian rugby might look to that area instead of where they are at the minute. And the general consensus is that Australia is not cutting any more teams. It's a big no-no, despite what's going on with the Western Force and their competition, and that New Zealand is pretty happy and content with 5, so that wouldn't be changing. So those are the teams that were up for discussion. But the chief executive of SANZAAR, Andy Marinos, has come out and basically said all this is speculation. That they're constantly looking at structures from 2021 onwards. What's been reported is, all speculation. There's no decision being made. Decisions around the future of the competition, number of teams, the structure of the competition will still be decided. They're going to continue to engage with their stakeholders, so Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the broadcasters, how it best could work. And that once they make any decisions, that they will tell us what the deal is. So basically stop talking about it because we haven't made our minds up, and when we know, we'll let you know, is what he's saying. There's often a lot of talk around here in New Zealand that we would like to see a round robin rather than a conference system. From the New Zealand media's perspective, it's that the New Zealand teams clobber each other and generally do well against the non-New Zealand teams. The Blues obviously being something of an exception. But yeah, the fact that the New Zealand teams have to play their New Zealand teams, they feel like is not perhaps the fairest. And then the second place New Zealand team ends up finishing below a team that they might have ordinarily finished above if it was just a round robin. Now they've kind of said the round robin can't happen in a pure form with the current number of teams because the number of weeks they have to play won't allow it. So if it was to be a round robin, it wouldn't be a pure, you play everybody round robin. It would have to be some kind of adaptation, which in itself is not going to be fair. So that's kind of a hard one. Whether the conference system stays, either way, the South African teams still have a whole lot of travel. We don't talk about that much here in New Zealand, the fact that the South African teams are on the road twice as long as everybody else. I don't know that we can discount that as a factor. I did do a video last season about how travel had affected results, and it wasn't actually as impactful as I thought it might have been. Like a lot of teams, like the Stormers, I think had a terrible run throughout New Zealand and Australia, and then they went home with a travelling team. I think they played the Blues, who had already been in South Africa, and they managed to get a win. So despite all the travel, they managed to win. So, but it can't be discounted that the travel it's one of the biggest hurdles of playing in Super Rugby, that you have to do all this travel, changing of time zones. So how they best deal with that, I feel like there's better ways they can deal with it by the use of the buys. I don't feel like they use buys very well in the current model. They just seem to throw them out whenever it suits, and that some teams just get lucky that they get a buy at a good time. Other teams end up doing a bunch of travel and don't get a buy until it doesn't really make any sense to get a buy. But hey, that's just me. I've done videos on that kind of stuff before. As we get into the season next year, I'll have a look at some more examples of where it seems to be kind of poorly organized. But yeah, that's the discussion. 14 teams potentially without the Sunwolves. The Sunwolves question is an interesting one as well, because from what I've read previously, not part of this story, is that the Japanese Rugby Union was really pushing for Japanese involvement in this kind of competition as a precursor to hosting the World Cup. And there's thoughts out there that perhaps after the World Cup next year, that same drive to have a team in Super Rugby is not going to be there. So there may not be that push or that buy-in to get these guys playing in Super Rugby. In terms of attendance, apart from the games where they muck around in Singapore and Hong Kong, I feel like the Sunwolves actually do pretty well. They seem to get really good crowds at that stadium, despite the fact that they're losing. So I'm kind of torn. Obviously we want the Sunwolves to get better results, but they seem to be getting good crowds. It's a hard one. But yeah, there's also issues if you do change it to some kind of round robin. Teams might not get to host. I seem to remember reading that they wouldn't get to host as many home games, and the whole reason for having the conference is that you play teams locally and you get to have a bunch of derby matches, so you get bigger crowds and you get better attendance, more people interested in watching it. That's another issue as well, in terms of the format, where they go with that. But yeah, it is going to be an interesting one to watch. What do you guys think? Is this all kind of storm in a teacup? Do you think it is likely that they keep reducing Super Rugby down? Because it doesn't seem... Last year was better than the year before. Well, this year, the season just gone was definitely better than the year before. Does it need to keep getting smaller to be interesting? And how will this affect the Pro 14 if teams keep going that way? Because that competition seems to keep getting bigger. And I've read articles, I think it was just this weekend just gone, about some of the lopsided results in that competition, which can tend to happen when you do get so many teams in there. There at times seems to be a lack of parity, which is what I've warned people kind of turns a lot of people off about Super Rugby. When the Crusaders are hosting, I don't know, a team like the Sunwolves, even though they didn't beat the Sunwolves that convincingly this year, the Sunwolves were never going to win that game, and you know that going into it, which as fans, especially for the everyday fan who's not going to watch every game, it's perhaps not one that they would be that keen on watching or that keen on attending. But yeah, I'm probably rambling a little bit here, but I just thought it was an interesting one to have a look at, seeing as the officials have actually commented on it and decided that everyone needs to stop talking about it. What do you guys think? You guys let me know your thoughts, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.